Hello, Rhea Cooper. How are you?
I'm doing well. I'm so glad to be here. I can't wait to talk to you and share more about my profession.
I know we are so excited to have you on here today. And for everyone listening, I want to introduce my good friend, Rhea Cooper. Rhea is a licensed professional counselor and a registered play therapist. And she recently added the title doctor in front of her name, which we're so proud of. And she's going to share more about that as we go on. But how I know Rhea is we actually met on the volleyball court about 12 years ago. Um, so we were both playing volleyball on separate Christian school teams, and we met up. We were at a state competition, and we both were from Louisiana. And we met up, I think it was in Shreveport, I think is where the tournament was. And some of the girls on my team came up and, yeah, some of the girls on my team came up and said, Chloe, there's another skirt girl over there. Do you know her? And I was like, no, but I want to. Well, and of course, when we both show up, the only two wearing skirts on the volleyball court of the whole competition, that is the genesis for a beautiful friendship that we have cultivated since then. So, and there we go. We got your video back a little bit.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So I'm just so thrilled to talk to you, Rhea. It's been a pleasure watching your journey, and Rhea has stepped into some incredible roles that God has called her to. And so I've been able to have a front row seat in her life, which has been so cool. But I know she's going to have tons to share with our audience. And Rhea, again, I'm so excited to have you on here, and welcome to the Skirted Professional Podcast.
Thank you. I'm so happy to be here. And again, I'm so proud of you for all the things that you've done. And it's been a blessing and an honor to witness your journey as well.
Thank you. Well, Rhea, let's get into this. Why don't you tell everyone where you're from, who you are, and kind of where it all started?
Sure. So I am from Lafayette, and I've been here for all of my life. Even though some of my friends have tried to persuade me to go through state lines, you being one of them. But it's been kind of my home has been Lafayette, and where it started was for me as a young kid. I felt like I had a calling on my life to help people, but I didn't know what that looked like or what that sounded like. I just knew I had a burden for people. And as I got older in high school, I faced a lot of, I guess you could call it traumatic things or stressful things. And during that season, I had such a great support system of family and friends, but also had a spiritual foundation that served me well during that time. Or I don't think I would be here right now with just all of the crisis that I have gone through. So from high school, just balancing being someone that was different in a school of, it was a private school, so it wasn't a huge school, but I had to kind of balance being unique or different and not letting that affect my confidence or my calling. But I had a great foundation with parents that taught me the truth, and that has carried me throughout my whole life. From high school, I chose the career in counseling, and that has been such an interesting process of doing my own personal counseling as well as getting into a profession that's very tough at times, but it's very needed. So the history of my life has looked like helping from since I was a kid until now. So I feel like that's been a part of who I am, and I don't know what I would be without that part or that calling.
Sure. Sounds like that from a young age, was your heart's desire, and it's just grown and grown and grown, which is so cool, you being able to step into that calling. And you mentioned being in counseling yourself. Is that a requirement to be a counselor? Do they recommend that you are in your own form of counseling?
Sure. So whenever I went, I did an undergrad in psychology, and then my master's program was in counseling education. And so what that looked like is we had to go through some group counseling with our peers. So that was the first taste of counseling for me, and it was very overwhelming and kind of stressful because before then I had never processed any trauma. It was just I stuffed and I repressed, and that was part of my personality and part of my personality that did not serve me well, in all honesty. So when I got into the program, I was kind of hit from uh, seeing people, seeing clients, but also having to do the work for myself. But I'm so thankful for that because that really challenged some of these negative thoughts of I should be strong, or I should have it all together, or I should just pray about it and everything's going to go away, which prayer is vital and important. But it also is important to have the counseling tools to back you as well. And I believe that is a huge part of what is needed. Foundation of your spiritual walk and your walk with God, but also some practical tools that can serve you through crisis. So from there, that started the habit of going to counseling, and I have utilized counseling in my personal life. I still go to my counselor every couple weeks to do a check-in because the things that I hear and the things that I process as a counselor can be a lot, and it can be very stressful, and it can be taxing at times. So that has helped me in my personal life with crisis as well as in my professional life.
Sure, that's awesome. Can you expound a little bit on having spiritual foundations, but then adding in those practical, everyday tactics to aid with prayer? I think a lot of times we know prayer is the end all, but in our everyday life, are there strategies, are there things that we can couple with prayer to make us better Christians in our everyday life? So I'm really interested to hear you expound on that.
Of course, yeah. And I believe that as a whole, we're kind of breaking down the stigma in mental health with churches, but I think we have a long ways to go just because, a lot of times people think that if you've got mental health struggles, depression, anxiety, trauma, that you haven't prayed enough or you haven't done enough work in church. And a lot of times that is not the case. Like we go through very intense things, and just because we have a foundation of truth and an apostolic heritage and background, it doesn't mean that we don't need the tools and the support from a counseling standpoint. So some things that has helped me is to really change my perspective of vulnerability and openness and sharing. That's been one of the main coping strategies I've used. Is it's so important to share what we're going through with safe people. And I use the word safe people because we don't want to share those things with people that can't reward our vulnerability, so to speak. So one of the main things I have found is find people that you trust and that is safe, and tell them, "Hey, I'm having a hard day." And let them pray for you, but also let them be a sounding board to listen, to support, and to encourage. So one of the first tools I would say is being heard, being validated, and sharing the vulnerability, and not just putting on a mask that sometimes we kind of carry as far as believers. And I think everybody has a mask to an extent, but it's so important for us to learn how to take off the mask with safe people.
Sure.
So kind of, I guess how I would explain that is sometimes we feel like we have to put on a mask of everything is okay. Like sometimes we'll go to church or we'll go to in our personal life, and we just kind of pretend like everything is okay and that we're not hurting or we don't have struggles. And I find that sometimes people will do that to the extent where they become anxious or depressed, or they struggle with mental health issues because they're not being authentic with the trials that they're facing. So I think that it's very important to pick safe people to share those things with, and to trust that people can handle our authentic self.
I love that. That is very, very good. And I agree with you. I feel like in our culture, it's easy to get away with being masked. And I loved the phrase, the change your perspective of vulnerability. And I think that's a really, obviously, this is a tag on words, but a really vulnerable place to get to be able to be vulnerable with someone. And so finding that safe place is so crucial in our everyday lives, and building that community around us, whether it's one person, whether it's three people, but they are for you, they have your back, and you can be your true self with. I think that's awesome.
Of course, yes. Well said.
So, Rhea, along your journey of, you've said you're a licensed counselor and you have a practice right now. Is that correct? Like, what challenges and lessons along the way. I guess, what was your greatest challenge in your schooling and the process of getting to where you are right now?
That's a great question. So where I started was I worked for the Center for Children and Families. So I was an in-home counselor. So basically what that means in a nutshell is I went into people's homes and I did counseling. It was family counseling. And a lot of times it was with mandated clients that were forced to go through counseling. So I saw a lot of resistance and a lot of challenges with that. And then from there, I started my own LLC, and I see clients of all ages, but mainly I work with trauma, anxiety, and depression. So what I found to be the biggest challenge, and this is probably a challenge that I face all my life, is self-compassion. That's one of the tools that I've had to learn, and it's been vital in my walk spiritually as well as clinically and professionally. So how I would kind of describe that is a lot of times in the beginning of counseling, I would just kind of emotionally beat myself up if I didn't do it, quote, quote, perfect, or if I didn't have all the answers. And I have found that I've done that in my personal life too, of expecting to be something that maybe I pushed myself to be that maybe I wasn't. And I have found that having some self-compassion for myself and grace actually connects me more to God, and it connects me to people because I'm being kind to myself. So I think that's a tool that as professionals, as believers, it is so essential that we be kind to ourselves, because if not, we're missing the grace component and the acceptance component that is needed to have true healing and a healthy mental health.
Wow. Yeah, that's good stuff. And so on a day-to-day basis, what are some ways that you, whether it be physically in a wellness sense or mentally, do you have strategies or tactics that if you feel yourself falling back into that habit of showing yourself you're not being kind to yourself, what are some ways that you can in that moment's time check yourself and then show yourself that compassion or grace?
Yes. Awesome question. I would say it's not an easy thing, and it's a learned behavior. Acceptance or self-compassion, as well as being kind of self-deprecating. We learn that and we pick that up along the way, especially if we've gone through crisis or trauma. That kind of can derail our self-worth, so to speak. So one thing that has helped me is to wake up with a sense of gratitude. And for me, prayer has been one of the most important things. I start my day with just praying, God, help me to see myself in the way that you see me, which is loved, understood, valued, worthy. And one thing that has helped me spiritually is just, how does God see me? Even if I can't see myself like that, I may see myself as, sometimes honestly a failure or not enough or damaged or wounded. But God sees me as loved, understood, and valued, especially in the kingdom of God. So I start my day with prayer and gratitude. And another thing that has helped me is to daily reflect of the things that I have done that I feel proud of or that I feel like I have done well that day. And sometimes people can kind of misunderstand arrogance versus a healthy sense of self-worth. And it is so important for us to be able to reflect on the things that we're doing that does make a difference. And that's not being arrogant. It's building our confidence and our worth so that we can have a healthy interactions with ourselves as well as God and people. So I think that's one thing, is just, again, changing your perspective to feel okay with having confidence and worth.
That's so cool. And I know in my personal life, I feel like, I'm in my later 20s now, which is just crazy because I feel really old, but I feel like I'm just now kind of starting to get into those areas where I am having to deal with that and deal with my humanity and deal with feelings of inadequacy. So I am having to implement these tactics of, you know what, I'm showing myself kindness today. It's so funny. I used that phrase earlier this week. I had flown in Monday morning super early. So I had been up since 3:30 that morning, and I love Mondays. They're my favorite days. I feel like it sets the tone for my week. And in this season of my life, I just have to be, for lack of a better word, a hustler.
Mm-hmm.
And I knew I was going to go home from the airport, get cleaned up a little bit, and then go straight to the office and start working. And in my mind, I told myself, you go and you work a couple hours, but then you're going to show yourself grace and you're going to go take a nap. And I remember that being small and insignificant to some, but for me, it was, Chloe, you're going to be kind to yourself today. And for your mental health, for your overall wellness and well being, you're not functioning at the level you could be until you have been kind to yourself. And so I don't know. I don't know if I'm abnormal of just walking into some of this, or if this is something that truly, once you're out of college and you've been in the working force a couple years, that you start to work through that. And that generally happens in your later 20s. So I love that. I'm sure this is a normal thing and no one is alone if they're feeling that way or having to show kindness to themselves.
And you make a great point with just how daily life, it's important for us to almost listen to what we need and to be very in tune with what is my body telling me, what is my spirit telling me, and what is my mind telling me. So having those daily check-ins to say, did I set enough boundaries today? Am I overworking myself? Am I burned out? And sometimes just being present and pausing and having those still moments, God can speak to us and tell us what we need, but also our body and our mind is going to tell us, hey, I need a little bit more grace. I need a little bit more compassion for myself. And I do that through journaling, or sometimes I just sit in silence and reflect on what do I need more of in my life? What am I missing? And how can I make sure that I'm having wholeness of self and being well-rounded? And part of that is boundary setting with other people and with myself, because I tend to work a lot as well.
Yeah, I know we're speaking to the choir here when we talk about this. And it's funny because you and I come from two different backgrounds, but both pertain to the body. So I have been more intentional in the physical aspect of being kind to my body, as far as what I put into my body, the exercise that I try to attain, skincare products, everything that goes with the physical aspects of my body. Whereas your training comes from being kind mentally. And so I love that kind of the two perspectives are coming together here. And I think what we're talking about is an overall wellness, soul, body, mind, and spirit. And so trying to figure out in every area how we can showcase kindness to ourselves. And for me, I agree that looks like me waking up and having my time with the Lord and Him rejuvenating me and setting my plan for that day. And then it's drinking lemon water, warm lemon water with honey to set my metabolism off right. And then it's washing my face with my favorite cleanser. And so it's finding one aspect in all of those areas.
Yes.
To just be, to show kindness to yourself that day, and finding those things that make you happy too, and that make you feel joy, and incorporating those into our everyday lives. I think that is so important. So Rhea, along your journey here, has the belief system and kind of, we've been talking about boundaries, and I want to talk about that a little bit more, but has any of have you felt hindered in your walk? You talked about being different in high school and having to step into your confidence and in those areas of being who you are and not letting that shake you. So based on your belief system and boundaries you've put in place in your spiritual life and in your personal life, have you experienced any resistance in your collegiate career or now in your professional career by the way you look or the way you dress, or maybe a belief system that you hold to?
Great question. I think that along the way, it's been kind of mixed. I would say if we were starting from whenever I was in high school with girls and on my volleyball team, they really surprisingly stepped up and they supported me and they encouraged me being different. And ironically enough, they would almost like take on some of the things that I would do as far as like, little praise breaks, so to speak, or prayer. We incorporated that in our team. And like it would be funny because we would score a point and you would see my team like pretending to shout or something along those lines, and they weren't doing it in a disrespectful way. They joined in on me being different because
Sure.
I didn't go into it being different as a weakness. I saw it as an opportunity to be able to reach out to people
Sure.
and to not change who I was, but also to not try to judge them. And that's so important. I think as believers, it's I would say it's vital for us to be difference makers, but not to do it in a judgmental way. Because if we go into our professional life and we go into our personal life and we're judging people, then people are not going to connect to us. They're not going to want what we have because it's going to feel unsafe and it's going to be something that they're not connected to. Along the way, as far as my profession, I did get some resistance here and there with just being different as far as in my clinical life or my master's program. Sometimes I would get some peer pressure and some questions, or trying to get me persuaded to do things, and I just stuck, to what I believed in, and people understood that eventually. But sometimes that came with some challenges as far as me staying true and not buckling from peer pressure. And at times that has been tough to do, but it's always
Sure.
been something that I'm grateful for, that I stuck to who I am and being authentic spiritually. In my personal, well, I guess I would say in my clinical experience, it's been so interesting because when I worked as an in-home therapist, I got some pushback as far as my age and being conservative with my dress, and people kind of hassled me a little bit about that. But now in a private practice setting, I actually have clients that have come to me and said, I don't know what it is, but I feel something different when I'm in this room with you. Like I feel safe. I feel understood. I feel at peace. And for me, I know that that only comes from God. I do have the clinical backing and the experience and the training, but every single time I'm very mindful of going into my counseling room and praying over that God would step in and have his presence in that room. And there are some clients that I can't talk about God with just because they're not open to that. And I have to respect that from a professional standpoint. But that doesn't mean that I can't go in the room and pray, pray over them before they get into the counseling building. So I've been very, very mindful of how do I
Sure.
create an environment at my work that God's presence is welcome there and he's welcomed into my sessions, and that's going to make a difference for the people that I work with as far as healing and connection and empowerment.
Wow. I could get emotional, and I did a little bit there, just thinking about people who have no reference point on your background, and they are coming through some traumatic experiences in life, and they really don't know what they're stepping into when they step into your room. They don't know the power that they're tapping into. And how cool is it to have a faith believing apostolic counselor who is preparing that room, who's bathing those walls in prayer, and they get to benefit from that. And God is reaching for them in that too. And it just blows my mind that we've experienced that power. And obviously, we want everyone to be able to experience what we have and what we feel, but they have no clue what they're stepping into. And how amazing that is. That and my I'm a very
Yes.
visual person, and so there's angels in that room, surrounding them while you're talking to them. There's an angel
Mhm.
standing behind you, and you literally get to be the hands and feet of Jesus in that
Yes.
room. And it's your responsibility on the back end to be prayed up and to be spirit led, but then you get to go and share that with them in that setting. And there is nothing more powerful than
Mhm.
that. And wow,
Yes.
that really touched me.
I had a client that was younger and she was battling just kind of being tormented at home from a parental figure. And she came into my office and she like started tearing up and she said, Rhea, I'm tormented with things at night, in the middle of the night. and she would see figures in the middle of the night. And it wasn't any kind of mental health diagnosis. It was spiritual warfare, and she didn't know what that was. She was a young kid, and she came into my office and she said, you know what is different? Like when I come in here, I see angels. I feel peace. And
Yeah.
it was one of the most amazing things that I have encountered, because she said, you know, you have in this place, I can see and feel something different. And she didn't have like a spiritual background. She just knew, you know, what it felt like. And she actually had seen angels in the counseling room. So it makes a huge difference how we have wellness for ourselves spiritually, emotionally, and physically, because we're going to take that energy into in our interactions with people, and they're going to benefit from that when we are taking care of ourselves spiritually as well as just emotionally and physically. So it has a dual effect.
So cool. So awesome. I love hearing the stories of spirits calling out angels. You know, that's a very biblical thing. And you being the adult in that situation, you recognize that. And again, it's just another example of she didn't know what she was walking into, but because her counselor is spirit filled and is doing what she needs to do before she ever steps into that session. And I do think that is a responsibility that God puts on us, is you need to prepare yourself before you ever go and talk to someone else, or before you ever go and try to minister or work in your career field. And I don't separate ministry and career. I think they are the same. I think they're congruent. That's been my experience. And so me preparing before I ever walked into a nursing shift, that was me gearing up. That was me gearing up for battle and putting on my armor. And God puts that responsibility on the professional to do what you needed to do before you ever go and try to help someone else. And I love seeing that showcased in the counseling profession as well.
Mm-hmm, definitely.
Very cool. Okay, so Rhea, you've given us some good tactics and feedback kind of on what you've learned and some struggles you've gone through. So tell us where you're at now. Tell us the specifics of what you're doing, maybe some accomplishments you've recently stepped into. We want to know what you're doing with your job, ministry, maybe about your family, and how all of that intersects with your career.
Yeah, of course. So what it's looked like from kind of a personal standpoint is building a house and like starting that journey of just starting a new chapter in my personal life. I still have, I mean, of course, a wonderful support system with my family, and I've been blessed to have connections with them, and they have supported me along the way. I couldn't have done it without supportive friends and family. But as far as where I'm at now, I am doing adjunct work at the University of Lafayette. So what I'm doing is I'm teaching master's level counselors how to counsel basically, and I'm teaching them about trauma. So I'm doing some part-time work teaching, and that's kind of how I've utilized my doctorate, is being able to teach and to pour into the new counselors. And that has been so rewarding to be able to teach them how to have self-compassion and to teach them about wellness. And that's been so rewarding to be able to be a part of. As far as what else I'm doing professionally is I have my own LLC, so private practice, and I see clients of all ages, but mainly it's the little ones and the teenagers. But I also have been able to see quite a bit of adults with trauma. So I would say my end all goal is, one, to be able to bring more awareness of mental health in the churches, and that's something I've been writing about and hopefully doing some curriculum writing in the future, as well as speaking and advocating for that, because I do believe there's still work to be done, essentially, with helping people to reduce the stigma of anxiety and depression and even suicide, because a lot of times depression is in our churches and it's not talked about and it's not confronted. And it's very important for us to be able to back that spiritually, as well as to give people tools to handle trauma so that they can live their best self. Instead of just surviving, I want them to be able to thrive. And part of that is all of our professions coming together, nurses, doctors, counselors, all of the wellness professions. Let's come together so that we can create wholeness in our churches. And then our churches will be healthy enough to reach our community in a better ways.
Totally agree. I think that's an awesome mission and vision. And it seems like now our church community is more open to individuals going into these secular careers. And we've seen a shift in those professions are our ministry. Like it's one and the same. And you're going to hear me repeat that because that has been my life mission. That's been my life message is nursing was my calling. Like that was my spiritual calling, and I'm so thankful for that. But it took me down a road that not many of my friends had been down.
Yes.
And I feel led to double back on something here to give some clarification. When you say trauma, I know in my mind, not coming from a counseling background, in my mind that is so elevated of this terrible, massive disaster that has happened in my life. And I want you to kind of give a definition of when you say trauma, how that can relate even to the common person and maybe things we don't typically classify as a trauma, but had a lasting impact on us.
Awesome. Wonderful question, Chloe. That's so needed for us to reframe what trauma means, because sometimes people think trauma is these huge, big life changes or events, and that is trauma. But trauma is everyday stressors. So what that could look like is coming from a family of divorce. It does include abuse, neglect, having parents that aren't present for us or aren't emotionally able to feed into us. Trauma is having a very stressful day and a job that you have to go in consistently and be poured out from. Trauma would be, getting in a car accident and you still have those flashbacks and those thoughts. So trauma is literally anything that derails us from having peace or wellness. Trauma is essentially when our mind is jumbled and it's racing. A lot of times people think that trauma, again, is one event, but trauma can be stuff that happens along the way in our life that has created a disconnect from ourselves or a disconnect spiritually or with other people. So it's very important for us, especially, well, for everyone, but I think in the church, it's essential for us to reframe trauma so that people feel understood, that people understand what they're facing, and that they can get the help that they need and the help that they deserve. Because if we don't understand what trauma means, then we may not even realize that we have gone through trauma or we are going through trauma and we need support.
Love that. Thank you for clarifying that. And I think that will speak to a lot of our listeners. It spoke to me. And again, reiterating, I'm just stepping into some of the mental foundations and strategies for myself, being 27 now and really being thrown into the crux of the business world and just life in general. I think it's really important for us, even if I don't go into that field or that degree path, to know some of that stuff, because that is everyday coping mechanisms. So I appreciate you sharing some of that.
Of course.
Rhea, what is your current life message, passion, or purpose? What would you say if you could, summarize that? Do you have a set mission right now?
That's a great question. It's a tough question. I guess what I would say my mission is to really see people. And I guess that would be very broad enough to encompass all of my goals. Is I want to see people. I don't want to judge them. I don't want to misunderstand them. If I can be intentional with how I see people and how I choose to see people, then I can allow God to help me see them through love and compassion and wholeness. And I think part of that comes with when I go to church or when I'm at the supermarket, or how do I show God's love in a daily life? So I've been really intentional with training my mind of how can I create every opportunity to help people feel worthy, to help people realize they're not alone, that they're understood. And hey, I'm human. So there's times where I'm impatient, and especially my family can vouch for that, where I'm just burned out and I don't choose the helpful path. But I've been really trying to train my mind to, one, see people in loving ways and to help to really be intentional with helping them to not feel like they're alone. But also, my other goal is to make sure that I'm not burning myself out in giving to people, because my job is very, very others focused, and I'm constantly being poured out in my personal life as well as clinically. So I have to make sure that I'm not pouring from an empty cup, and that I'm taking care of myself so I can keep giving. And it doesn't have to be where I'm draining myself. It can be twofold. So I can give to people, but also can make sure that I'm okay and safe as well. So I would say I'm trying to find the balance of that self-compassion and making sure that I'm staying aligned with that.
That's awesome. Love it. Love it. Well, Rhea, I think we are wrapping up here. And again, thank you for your time and your expertise and the wisdom you have given. I have so many notes on my paper right now, and I can't wait to share this episode. And some key things that stood out for me is, and I'm going to quote you, it's vital for us to be difference makers. And I think that is just, it stands alone. It speaks for itself. In everything we do, we're called to be difference makers. I love that you talked about being kind to ourselves and how that's a learned behavior. And everything in life is a journey. And so it takes failing one day and deciding I can do better the next day, or failing 1 hour and saying, you know what, this next hour I can change right then and showcase love to myself or show kindness to myself. And so several great points that you brought up that I'm, again, so excited to share. And Rhea, we have a question that we are coining to ask at the end of every podcast for the Skirted Professional. And so I'm going to ask you, and that is, what is saving your life right now?
Wow, that's amazing. I would say what's saving my life right now is is my calling. I guess I would say that. Like, each time that I've gone through something tough in my life, God has stepped in and said, I'm calling you for a greater purpose. Keep moving forward, even through the trauma and the stress. So I would say that what's saving me is my calling, as well as, if we're being kind of goofy as well, my dog. My dog is my self-care.
There you go.
And so just having moments of joy and moments of just fun and compassion, those things are a saving grace. So I kind of add that in for humor purposes, but ultimately God's grace has saved me and it keeps sustaining me. So that has been a saving grace.
That's awesome. And a little humor to go along with her saying her dog is saving her. Rhea, can I share your dog's name?
Oh yeah, of course.
So she has this little cute dog named Autumn. And Autumn and I have a love-hate relationship. One time I was at Rhea's house and I had my hair up in a bun. I think we were watching a movie. And this little 3-pound dog jumps up and takes my bun out and like unravels my bun and then starts running away with my hair. And so basically dragging me around the floor by my hair. So I think she's warmed up to me now, but I love that she's saving your life because she definitely adds joy in all of that.
Of course. Yes, she does. For sure.
Well, Rhea, again, it was so great talking to you. We hope to have you on again in the future, and maybe once you have some of that curriculum put together, we can have you do some type of broadcasting or conference or something with CSAUCY and the Skirted Professional. So thank you again for your time and your wisdom and the expertise that you have shared with us, and we wish you nothing but the best in your future endeavors.
Yes, thank you so much for having me and listening, and thank you for the impact you've made in my life and so many. So we talked about a difference maker, and you were the definition of that, my friend. So I love you, I'm proud of you, and thank you for the impact you're making.